Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Charlie Schreier. I'm the Director of Marketing for SmartAction, and I'll be your host today as we discuss how a national insurer, Legal & General America, implemented AI-powered virtual agents in their contact center. So leading today's webinar will be Chris Wong. He's the Assistant Vice President for Admin Services at Legal & General. He has 21 years of experience in life insurance, and the last decade he spent at Legal & General transforming their operations into a premier service provider for new business and customer service. What I think is cool about today's webinar is that you get to hear just a living, breathing case study of AI automation in the contact center. Chris is going to tell you about his approach, his evaluation process, his business case, implementation, results. So I highly encourage you to ask questions and really use him as a resource today. Speaking of which, you can submit questions anytime throughout the webinar via the Q&A button in the presentation window. It's just at the bottom there. And Chris or I can answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. And lastly, you'll get a copy of the slide deck immediately after the webinar, as well as the recording in the next day or so as soon as it's finished downloading. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Chris. Welcome, Chris, and thanks for being with us today and speaking.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining our session today. And I hope it'll be useful to you as you are exploring your journey and how to use virtual assistants and AI into your contact centers and other solutions. So, but a little bit about ourselves here before we move on then. So Legal & General is a financial services company that is based out of the UK. It was founded in 1836, so we've got a long, rich history there. We are the 9th largest insurance company in the world as measured by assets under management. We've got over $1.3 trillion in management there. Worldwide, we've got over 10 million customers, and more specifically in the US, we've got over 1.3 million customers here in the US. In the U.S. operation, we are primarily a life insurance carrier. So for those that may know or have life insurance, we sell under Banner Life and William Penn, and we primarily sell the term life insurance product. On an annual basis, then, what we pride ourselves on is the amount of claims that we pay out to protect the families that purchase our products, and we typically pay out over $800 million in claims annually. Okay, so then just more locally about our operations in the U.S. We've got a contact center based out of Frederick, Maryland. We have over 392,000 calls that we take annually. Using a customer survey tool, then we measure our performance and metrics and customer satisfaction. And we average a 4.92 out of a 5-point scale. Our NPS score is 69, and our average abandon rate is about 1.56%. So solid numbers, but certainly, things that we can still improve upon. We do track what kind of calls come into our contact center, and the two biggest ones that we always see are customers that don't receive their bill because they've not signed up for electronic funds withdrawal or any other communication methods, so they rely on that paper bill that comes through the post office. Then subsequently, if they don't get that bill, their policy might lapse and they lose their coverage, and that's a big pain point for us because once you lapse in the life insurance space, it's not like you forgot to pay your Comcast bill or your utility bill and you just pay a small fee or a fine of some sort and you can reinstate that service. For us, once you lapse a policy, you've got to go through the full medical underwriting process again, where we might have to retrieve medical records from your doctor's offices, or even more difficult for the customer, then we might have to collect new blood or urine samples, et cetera, to complete that underwriting. So those are the things that are our top concerns. So then a few years ago, our current environment is really a touch tone driven phone tree and vector system. We don't really have an IVR. So we had looked at what it would take to get to a voice-driven phone system, obviously to provide better service, more self-service, and of course 24/7 service for the customer. So when we looked at it a few years ago, the big name players out there, got a quote from them, and it was well over $500,000 just to get hardware, servers, all the things that we would need to be able to get to a more modern platform. And even at that time, it did not include any sort of AI or virtual agent. It was strictly IVR and prompts to get to what you wanted to. So fast forwarding then a few years after that, I tend to attend industry conferences to learn a little bit more about technologies and things that are out there. So happened to run into SmartActions at one of these conferences, and we kind of started some of the discussions about, what are the technologies out there, what's the latest things, what kind of options are there, and of course the pricing. For us, the price point was very important to us, just because being a term life insurance carrier, the profit margins are quite thin, so we don't have a lot of flexibility in what we can pay for external services. So after the conference then, we committed to let's learn, let's kind of explore, and let's see if we can get this into our price point, and let's see how we can go about learning about these options. So then going to next slide, Charlie. Thank you. So then with our business case and the initial discussions with SmartAction, we explained what we wanted to do, a completely voice-driven platform, and what would that take to get there. But they actually cautioned us not to go the full boat, and said, let's learn a little bit more about what your pain points are, and let's see how we can solve those first. And if it requires replacing your entire IVR or phone system, we can certainly do that. But if we can focus on the issues, you might be able to just snap in these IVAs and the AI into components without having to do the whole thing at this point in time. So we kind of took an incremental approach then based on that, because obviously replacing an entire phone system would be a lot more work and more costly at that point in time. What we then did was ask for some of the sample recordings. We wanted to see how the AI interacted with the customer. Was it able to capture their intent? Did it actually understand the customer? And did it provide reasonable responses to what they were looking for? We then asked for some of their references. Who are their current customers? Can we talk to their customers and learn about the company and their approach, and were they easy to work with, etc. So after comparing SmartAction along with a few of the other vendors, we felt they were the best business partner to proceed with. So from there then, we really went back to, okay, what are the problems that we commonly see in our contact center? The first one that we identified was we were constantly getting customers calling in and wanting to make a phone payment, and we did not offer that. The only method to make a payment to us was either through the electronic funds transfer that I mentioned earlier. Through our website, you can make an online payment, or they had to send in a paper check. So out of our 1.3 million customers, only 40 to 45% are signed up for the electronic funds transfer. So we still have well over 500,000 people relying on that paper bill and just those payment options. So we were receiving about 80 calls a day just asking if they could make a payment by phone, and we had to turn them away or direct them to our website. The second problem that was most common for us then was, again, regarding these missed bills that led to the elapsed policies. So as we described it, and yes, they can sign up for emails, but a lot of them get caught in spam, or they just simply ignore the emails because customers receive hundreds of them a day, and between sales and everything else, they just weren't looking at them. So So that was the second problem that we were trying to resolve. So with the solutions then, what they proposed was obviously the automated pay by phone option using an ACH transaction. So, and I say ACH because with the credit cards, we don't process a lot of credit cards. We only allow them on the initial premium payment. So because of that, then the transaction fees for a credit card transaction are pretty high for us, 2.5% to 3%. And we just can't absorb that into our cost structure. And with our average premium being over $1,000, we didn't feel it was right to pass on that fee to the customer. So we opted in for just using a ACH transaction at this point. So with the solution then, it sounds pretty simple. You're making a payment over the phone, but we tried to design this in a way that was going to be easiest for the customer. As you can imagine, everyone does carry their credit card around, but nobody carries their checkbook around, if they even have a checkbook any longer these days. So in discussions with SmartAction, then we decided, okay, well, if we've got a online payment option already and a customer stores their banking information online, is there some way we could utilize that banking account to make that phone payment? So what we were able to design then is if they do go on the phone to make a payment, the AI itself will be able to get the data from us to recognize if a customer has a account set up and then offer that as an option during that phone payment transaction. So you'll hear a phone call later on, but essentially the option would be if you have a account set up, the virtual attendant is going to recognize that, and it's going to tell the customer, I see you've got an account set up with us ending in 1234. Would you like to go ahead and use that account or not? And of course, if they don't have an account set up with us, it's going to bypass that entirely and simply start collecting the routing and the account number to proceed with that action. And then from there, they can obviously opt out. They can transfer to our contact center. And then we also built it, if they have multiple policies with us, they could go ahead and make another payment for another policy. So not only was it just designing the convenience of that, then we tried to make it as simple as possible, knowing that we couldn't collect a credit card for that transaction. Then with the second problem that we had, again, relying on the post office just isn't feasible. We get complaints all the time about the missing bills. So instead of, again, just relying on the emails, we looked at what are consumers today doing to get reminders or to get information. And I think most of us rely on text messaging. We get it from our credit card every time there's a transaction. We get it from various other sources notifying us of information. And with text, what we found obviously is you can ignore an email, but for whatever reason, when you see that little digit across your message app, everybody looks at it. That curiosity to see who texted them is just overpowering. So we felt like this was the best medium to remind the customer that they have a bill. So for us, text messaging was brand new. We had never gone down that route, so we had to learn all about the TCPA regulation. We had to learn about that from our legal counsel and figuring out how do we mitigate this risk and utilize this service. So again, working with SmartAction, then we decided customers would have to opt in on our website. They would have to enter their telephone number. We would immediately do a two-factor authentication to confirm that number. And then once they're set up, we would use that file then to send a file to SmartAction on a daily basis. So the way we designed it was if a customer hadn't paid their bill, then 5 days before that due date, we're going to send a file to SmartAction. They then generate the text message to the customer, one, reminding them to pay their bill. And then the great thing about it was we designed because of the AI, we could design essentially options for that customer. One, they could make that payment directly through the text message. and it would be linked to that bank account that they had online. Two, obviously, as part of TCPA, they had to have the option to opt out of text messaging altogether. And then the third option was we could tie them into our 800 number directly from that text. So if they wanted to speak to somebody, they go ahead and just press that number and they would get connected into our 800 number. So two great solutions for us just based on, our needs and not having to take the full approach where we replace our entire IVR system. And this would give us the ability to kind of test out the AI and the virtual attendant, since this was our first instance of using this kind of technology. Okay, so what was the implementation timeframe like? Surprisingly, it was extremely quick. We kicked everything off from kickoff to live calls and text was 3 months. And I think the reason we were successful was we kind of broke, and I've got it broken down here. One, we met weekly with the SmartAction project team, and then we had our own internal dedicated team that could just work through everything very quickly, define the requirements, the call flows, et cetera. And we just kind of had all the resources aligned to keep everything moving forward. The QA and the UAT time was about 2 weeks as we tested everything in a kind of test environment, the entire call flow, and just making sure the bot could understand everything. And then lastly, what was successful about it was after the initial implementation, it wasn't the end of the relationship with SmartAction. There was continuous follow-up. They record every single call that goes into that platform. So they're listening to it and trying to fine-tune some of the logic in the virtual attendant. And then even on our side, as we built the call flows, we created a lot of business rules that would essentially allow a payment or not allow a payment. So we were fine-tuning a lot of our business rules to try to get improvement on that. So the project team itself consisted of our contact center management, and then we also included a lot of the phone reps that take the live calls, just because they're most familiar with the customer and their interaction and the type of questions they have. We included our IT, the QA department. We had a business analyst assigned that could help document all the workflows, the procedures, et cetera. And of course, the telephony network engineers, because we needed to be able to pass the calls back and forth between us and SmartAction. And then lastly, it was kind of almost after the project, but we got our creative services department involved because we needed a ability to communicate with our customers that we have these new features available to them. Historically, we don't send any marketing out to our customers. So what we did was we designed a little stuffer to put into the bill, and it basically explained these services and advertised them. So once we started that stuffer, we probably saw an increase in the phone payments and the opt-ins for the text messaging grow by at least 20 to 30%. So the main thing with the project team is getting them assembled from day one. Not bringing in your QA people, in week 10 or something of the process. If they're involved early on, they'll have a better understanding of all the design and everything we've created, and then we don't have to get them up to speed for the testing piece of that. The way we did it then was we broke it out into essentially 3 work streams. We had to develop all new APIs and web services for this data exchange. This was something new for us. We hadn't worked with a vendor to kind of pass that data real time back and forth like that. So that was one critical component. Next piece of it, and I'll say this for anyone that has done it before, it sounds quite simple to design call flows and stuff, but you really have to do it from the perspective of a customer. How are they going to ask the question? What kind of words or terminology are they going to use to convey their intent? So you've got to think about that, because when you design the call flows, then we have to design all the possible responses and the scenarios the customer might have. So that's the challenging part, and making sure that you put yourself in the customer's shoes and how they would phrase a question. The last piece for us then was just the remodeling of the phone tree. Adding these new options, then it kind of disrupted everything that we had with our current phone tree and phone vectoring system. So, okay, I'm going to turn it over to Charlie here, and he's going to give you a sample clip and explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for adding all that detail around not only the solutions but also how it was implemented. I think it's really valuable for the audience, and it's good as people start to explore these solutions to think about, what is it really going to look like? What is it really going to sound like? And so with that in mind, we'd like to play you a clip of an actual live call that went through the legal and general billing system. So this is an actual make the payment. Now you'll notice that we did redact some of the personal information for security purposes, but this is a call that actually went through and successfully made a payment. So I'm going to go ahead and click play here, and you should be able to hear and see the video play right there on your screen.
Calls may be recorded. In order to verify your account, please say or enter the last 4 digits of your Social Security number or tax ID number.
00.
Was that 00?
Yes.
Please say or enter the last 6 digits of your policy number.
34.
Was that 34?
Correct.
I found a premium with the amount of $209.43 and a due date of September 5th, 2018. Would you like to pay this now?
Yes.
I found existing bank information tied to your account. The last 4 digits of the bank account number on this file are 02. Would you like to use this now?
Yes.
Do you authorize this payment of $209.43 from this account to Legal and General America?
Yes.
Thank you. Your payment has been scheduled and will be processed immediately if sufficient funds are available. Please note that it may take up to 48 hours to post to your account. Your confirmation number is EFKLDY. Would you like me to repeat that?
No.
Is there anything else that I can assist you with today?
No.
Thank you for calling Legal and General America. Have a great day.
So you can hear from the clip there that, really the virtual agent is handling the call in much the same way that a live agent would be handling the call. So I'm going to pass back to Chris so that he can talk a little bit about some of the results that he saw.
Okay, great. So as we talked about then with the 2 different solutions, obviously to present my business case, I had to make some assumptions on the savings and the cost, and what would the net savings be. So we knew, as I explained earlier, we were receiving about 80 calls a day asking for the phone payment option, and for us, then, average call is about 4 minutes. That would equate to roughly 1,300 hours, and our hourly rate then roughly $44,000 annually that I could save from my reps being off the phone for that transaction. In reality, then, once we got it implemented, we did the stuffer to kind of promote it. We've been seeing over 131 payments a day, which equates to about 2,200 hours annually then, which is then $72,000 that we're saving. So overall, much higher phone usage than we expected. So that's all great things. And then of course, the customer convenience there. I've got a number there on the containment rate. So for those that aren't familiar with it, that's one of the key metrics that you're going to be looking at when you design your call flows and just in general anything with the AIs and the virtual attendants, because the last thing you want to have is you've built something, the AI can't handle it, and then it's transferring to a live rep anyway. So then, you're paying for the cost of the virtual attendant, and then you're still paying the cost of your live person to take care of it. So just for comparison, and what does 73% even mean? I know I've attended a few other conferences and have heard some other insurance carriers talk about their containment rates for chatting and voice, and they were around 25 to 30%. So for us at 73%, we're extremely excited about that. But with that said, it didn't start off at that percentage. I kind of talked about we had continuous modifications and improvements from the implementation date. So when we initially started it, it was probably around 30 to 35%. But then within a few months of kind of two approaches to it, kind of two fronts, I guess. One, on our side, we revisited the business rules and the logic that we originally created, and kind of determined, were there more instances or scenarios where we could allow a phone payment? Just some complexities on our side, for example, are if someone has more than one bill for a particular policy open, then we can't allow a payment, because it'd be more programming essentially on our side. The SmartAction technology, I think, could handle it. It's more on our back end, how do we pass the correct data to make sure the customer understands what they're trying to pay. And then the other portion that got continuously updated then was on the SmartAction side. So as Charlie's going to explain in a little bit, there's machine learning involved. So being their first insurance company, the life insurance company, then there was new terminology, new words that the AI had to learn. And then, of course, just adjusting to our phone systems and the background noises and everything else that's involved with trying to capture that intent. So again, after a few months, though, tweaking internally and the AI rules, we were able to get this up to a 73% containment rate. And we still have a few business rules that we can still tweak to increase this further. So, but overall, exceeded all of our expectations, and we're extremely happy with it. On the text message reminder, that one's a little bit harder to measure whether it's successful or not, but ultimately for us, the measurement is, have we prevented a customer's policy from lapsing? So, we've got, it's been just over a year now, and we've got over 12,000 people signed up for the text messaging, and over 1,000 payments have been made via the text message itself. So, we're hopeful that if we at least save 12,000 people from lapsing their policy, then, this in itself has done its job. So, so overall, though, extremely excited with the results. We continue to get, increasing usage of both, and, we look to expand on that. I'm going to turn it back over to Charlie to talk a little bit more about the cognitive abilities.
Great, thanks, Chris. So yeah, I'll just keep this fairly brief, as I think that what you're talking about is far more interesting. But from an AI capabilities standpoint, when you think about what AI is sort of doing to make this experience even better than your traditional automation options, there's a couple of things that really stand out. The first thing is the speech recognition on the front end, which continues to improve, and obviously there's lots of different options for where you can obtain speech recognition, but I think what's most important is the cognition on the back end. So it's not just hearing what was said, but understanding what to do with what was said. So specifically around things that are said that are not part of the exact call flow. So if someone goes a little bit off the script or says, hold on a second, I need to find my my bill or something along those lines, that the AI can sort of gracefully handle those things and understand what to do with what was said. So that's a really important piece, we think from an AI standpoint that, extends beyond what traditional automation might be able to offer. The second thing, and Chris alluded to this a little bit, but that's using data to really be predictive and offer highly personalized experiences. So one of the coolest things about AI is that it can really take and consume lots and lots and lots of data points, even just about one customer, and use those data points to make predictions about, maybe why the customer is calling or what they may want to do next, and really personalize the conversation too. So even something so simple as to be able to identify their phone number and greet them using their name, move right into the authentication piece so that they can start to do the thing that they want to do. There's also personalization within the the voice calls and SMS texts that Chris discussed, where we're able to access their customer account and pull directly from their bank account or any of the payments that they've set up before. And so being able to do that really makes it effortless for the customer, which is a really high predictor, and it's key to keeping customers and keeping them loyal. And it also improves their usage of the system, which is very cool. So the last piece, as well as what Chris alluded to, is the machine learning. And so we use supervised machine learning, and really across the board, supervised machine learning seems to be what most people are using, just because you really wouldn't want the machine going off the rails and learning something from one or two customers or from data that just isn't quite right. To start interacting with your customers, it could create bad experiences. So using humans to supervise that machine learning, and being able to add some of that new language on an ongoing basis, being able to improve the capabilities around understanding things that are happening in the background, or background noise reduction and improving that speech recognition. So all of that rolls up into machine learning. And so these three data points are important around why AI is a little bit better and extends beyond what types of automation options we've had in the contact center before. But what we've also found is that the key to really good AI is really good design. So being able to design the AI to be as human-centric as possible. So in the clip that we shared, the video that we shared just a few minutes ago, you may have noticed that it really wasn't all that interesting. There's a lot of yes, no's, but it's kind of designed that way. And I think one of the things Chris may also talk about, and we may ask him a question about, is around the design and how much effort goes into that. So it's a payment. You don't really need to make it all that interesting. It doesn't need to have a whole ton of cognition on the back end. It doesn't need to be complex or make the customer go, wow. All it needs to do is have them get their job done. And so being able to design that in the most human-centric way, what does that look like? And so that's what it looked like and sounded like from a payment perspective. But maybe if there was another option or a different type of call that was being automated, the AI really may play a stronger a piece in that. And I think in Chris's roadmap, which he's going to share, you'll see that there's a lot more opportunity to utilize the cognition on the back end. So pass it back to Chris at this point, just to kind of wrap us up, and then we'll maybe move into some Q&A.
Okay, great, thank you. Before I get to the roadmap, I failed to mention one thing that that was a great feature for us is, I kind of touched on it, I suppose. SmartAction records every single call. So they've got a nice web portal where we can log in. We can see every call that came into the attendant with a date and time. We can listen to the recording ourselves. We can download it. But then it gives us some key data points with the policy number, what number did they call from, etc. And lastly, probably the most important piece is just the disposition of the call. Was the payment successful? Did it fail? Was the customer not able to authenticate themselves, or were they not authorized to make a payment? So using all of those different dispositions, then that's kind of how we fine-tuned our business rules, how we fine-tuned and working with SmartAction to kind of tweak whether it was a call flow, some of the language. Okay, yeah, it seems like they were kind of confused on this particular portion. Let's reword that phrasing there to make it more clear. So that was a very important part of the solution there itself. So then, obviously, we've been in production for just over a year, and being very satisfied with everything that we've seen with the solutions, and of course the AI itself. Then we've gone ahead and signed some additional contracts to move forward with expanding the capabilities. So the first one then is, you already heard the front door authentication on that payment piece. Only certain customers are authorized to make a payment, so we had to build that into the phone payment portion. But now what we want to do is move that front door authentication to the very beginning of the phone call. It takes on average about 30 seconds to confirm a person, who they are related to the policy and what kind of information we can disclose with them. So if we can move that up front for every single phone call, that's going to save us 30 seconds for every call we take in the call center. The second piece then is moving back to our original plan where we wanted to replace our entire touch-tone phone system with a natural language virtual attendant kind of AI capability. So, the plan then is to have a customer be able to call in, interact with the attendant, do self-service, not only obtaining additional data, but then also transactions, simple transactions like address changes or updating their banking information and stuff like that, and then also requesting some forms. So, we're hopeful that we can get anywhere from, at least at a starting point, 20% of the calls going through the virtual attendant, and then therefore not even needing to get into my contact center. Another feature that we originally wanted way back when the cost was over $500,000 was a callback feature. I think most people are familiar with that. When you call into a company and they tell you the wait time is 40 minutes, then you've got the option to either stay on the line or get a phone call back when your queue in line essentially approaches the front. So we want to build that feature in. And then yet another option, and again, I think the common theme for us and our customers is we want to provide as many options as possible. So kind of leveraging the same process with the text messaging, we want to have people opt in for an auto dialer where we could place a phone call to you, similar to your doctor's office, reminding you of your appointment. So, if a premium is due on Friday, we could call a couple of days in advance, remind them that they've got a premium due. And then the great thing is if we get a live person and they are ready to make a payment, we could transfer them directly into the existing phone payment process without having to rebuild any of that. So, that's something that we're very keen on. So far, I've only been talking about how we've been impacting and using this service on the customer service side of things. As part of our life insurance business, we also have a front-end new business process. And I've got a team that conducts telephone interviews with our customers to collect demographic data, product information, and then they go into asking all kinds of medical and health questions. So on average, those interviews take about 50 minutes. So what we'd like to do is if we can shave 15 to 20 minutes off of that phone call, for at least for my live rep, and have the virtual agent take care of that demographic data gathering, then we could get more capacity for my phone reps to take more interviews, and then also allow us to do what we call some warm transfers of customers directly into our system. So, we're very keen on that one, but that's probably going to be a 2019 type initiative. So, and then lastly, I kind of mentioned we don't take credit card payments other than for that initial premium. So we've got a direct-to-consumer sales channel that is interested in using that as part of their sales process and utilizing the credit card. So when we're ready to do that, we would probably leverage again, similar call flows and processes that we already established with our current ACH transaction. So overall, again, we've been very happy with the technology, the pricing, the partnership with SmartAction. We've seen great results, and their solution just works really well for us. So that's why we decided to go ahead and move forward with expanding that. So anyway, hopefully you found this helpful, and certainly then we can take any questions.
Chris, that's great. Thanks for going through the roadmap there. We do have just one more quick slide. Got to do our shameless plug here for SmartAction, but then immediately following, we'll definitely get into some Q&A, as we do have some good questions here for you, directly for you, I think, not too many for me, which is good. So just a little bit about SmartAction. So SmartAction is, the leading AI-powered virtual agent for contact centers. So companies like Legal & General use us to help them automate more than what they had been automating before. So oftentimes what we're doing is going in and evaluating, so what are the call types that your live agents are handling today that are transactional and repetitive and oftentimes redundant, and how can we use AI and human-centric design to automate the calls that your agents are handling today. So in Chris's case, actually, they weren't handling those things, but in many cases, that actually is what we're doing, is taking those calls away from what the agents would be doing and using virtual agents to help do that a little bit faster and a little bit easier. And so our goal is to make it the easiest and lowest risk AI implementation and transformation possible. So we have state-of-the-art AI and speech recognition capabilities, but we combine that with a team of customer experience experts and fanatics who spend all of their time figuring out how to make it as easy as possible for not only our clients, but our clients' customers to be able to offer great self-service. So what we allow is for companies to outsource all of their voice and chat automation to us and use our CX team to their full advantage to be able to automate those things in the most human-centric way possible. So that's just a little bit about SmartAction. If you have any questions or want to ask something specific about SmartAction, please enter it into the Q&A box there. And so at this point, I think we'll look at some of the questions. And so the first question that we have here today, Chris, is for you. And so what are some of the best practices that you learned and that you would want to share with the group about AI and virtual agents? You went through some really good stuff about your own experience, but what are some best practices if you were going to pass them along?
Yeah, so I think, for one, and I did touch on a few of those, obviously the planning for the call design is critical. Just looking at, from the customer's eyes, especially on this next phase that we're going to be doing, where we're replacing the entire phone system, we've really had to look at, okay, how would a customer even phrase that they're inquiring about, their cash value that they have on a policy? Would they even use that terminology, or would they just say, can I borrow money from this policy and stuff like that? So from a best practice perspective, it's really, making sure you put yourselves in the customer's shoes and then getting the phone reps that take those live calls as part of your design discussion, because they definitely bring a different perspective into the conversation, and have a better sense of how a customer may word their questions. In addition to that, then obviously listening to a lot of phone calls, just the recordings that you already have, how do customers phrase their questions, and therefore getting insight from that perspective. From a technology perspective, we had to look at just how the calls are passed back and forth between SmartAction and ourselves. So, for those that are kind of going through it, you'll learn about, what's a SIP connection versus a PSTN connection. So, there's benefits to both, but, you've got to properly evaluate that and get your telephony engineers involved to make the right decision for your organization. Trying to think here off the top of my head here, so apologize. But I think just the planning overall, with the cost benefit, obviously for any organization, being able to justify the spend and the savings is critical to getting senior management approval for the funding, and then of course even the IT resources to work on the project. So making sure you've got the right data on your time savings, the calls, the type of calls you're going to be receiving, and just making sure you put a good business case together.
And that's a perfect segue actually into the next question we got, which is about ROI. And so how long did it take you to recognize ROI, and what did that look like?
Sure. The great thing with SmartAction and just the way their pricing model is set up, the implementation fees are really low. So then after that, it's just a per transaction, essentially per minute charge. And we had calculated how much it literally costs for our live agents per minute, and compared that obviously to what SmartAction would be charging us, and the delta there in itself was already would already provide a return. And then you factor in the low implementation fees, then it really was a no-brainer. Even when I pitched the second project in phase 2, it didn't even cross anyone's mind that it wasn't worth pursuing it. So for us, probably within a 3 to 4 month time frame, we were already made back all the expenses we put into it, and at this point, it's completely a net savings going forward month to month.
Awesome. That's great. Great to hear. So one last question, and it's kind of specific to the containment that you were discussing in the voice channel. You mentioned that you had 73% containment, and you were really happy with that, and that's great. But this person says, what happened to the other 27%? Sure.
So really the balance of that then was more related to our business rules. I kind of touched on one of them, where if a customer has multiple bills open for a particular policy, then we kick them out of the virtual attendant, and they've got to talk to a live rep. Another scenario is that we only allow certain types of relationships to make a payment. So for instance, on a life insurance policy, you've got the insured, you've got a owner on the policy, you've got a payer, you might have a beneficiary. So not everyone was allowed to make a payment, and that's very specific just to our industry. So initially, we only were allowing the payers of a policy to make a payment, and then after additional consulting with our legal departments, then we expanded that to the owners, and now we're in fact expanding it even to the insureds, because we've gone back to them and said, an insured should be able to pay their own policy, and they've agreed to it. So those are kind of some of the reasons why they get kicked out. But again, primarily it's because of the business rules that have been set up. And another reason I can think off the top of my head is they weren't able to provide a social security number or tax ID that was tied to that particular policy number, in which case then they're not authorized and we couldn't authenticate them. And then they would also get dropped out of the system and back to customer service. So.
Excellent. So one more question that just came through, and I think it's specific to the payment application itself. And the question is around the AI technology, and it seems as if the AI and the service could be done direct to consumer, and that you could potentially even cut out the agent altogether. And I think maybe you addressed it a little bit with talking about front door authentication, but could you maybe go into a little more detail about how that works, with regards to using the AI to essentially automate that entire process, as opposed to filling in the agent and then passing it to the automation and potentially passing it back?
Sure. So certainly, that could be something down the road, but as part of our sales process, we do some needs analysis and some evaluation with the customer on what their needs are, and there might be different products. So I could certainly see down the road, if we could design the call flows enough that it could handle an entire transaction itself without a live person. But we're nowhere near that capability yet, even from internal. I'm sure SmartAction could probably accommodate it, but just from our own internal structure, being able to walk a customer through the various product options, being able to explain it. And I think that's our challenge in the life insurance industry is, we've got a consumer that doesn't know life insurance very well. They've never studied it in any type of schooling. So, we've got to explain a lot of the features in a simplified and, like you said, a human-centric way that they can understand it. So I just don't see that we're ready for that option yet. So with that, then, obviously we would want a live person to kind of do the sale, do all that explanation of what a product is, what are the features and what's available to the customer. And if we can make the sale then, and we can make that payment, we would go ahead and just transfer it to SmartAction for that credit card piece, because they handle the PCI of it, the portion of that. For us, we don't really want to store any credit card information because then we would have to get PCI compliant, and that's not something we're interested in doing at all. So that's kind of where we want them involved, so we don't have to do it ourselves.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for clarifying and going through that. I think as you talked a little bit about the selling and persuasion, I mean, that is actually at this point with artificial intelligence not quite what you would want the AI doing is performing things that require selling or complex judgment and critical thinking, but definitely in the future that could be something that it could be trained on, and so that's great. So I think with that we've reached our time here, and if there are any other additional questions that either didn't get addressed or that you think of afterwards, please feel free to reply to any of the emails that you get over the next couple of days. As I mentioned, you'll get the slide deck later today, and you will get the recording over the next day or so. So like I said, you can reply to either of those emails with questions, and we'd be happy to answer those. Like I said, either Chris or I can do that. So Chris, I want to thank you for going into such great detail about your implementation, your experience, and really adding that story to this webinar. It made it really great, and we appreciate your time. So thank you so much for doing that.
Sure, not a problem. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.